Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be talking to you about global mobility and Erasmus opportunities here in Trinity College Dublin. My name is Alina and I'm the International Partnerships and Exchange Officer, and joining me today is Brendan Tighe, who's the Erasmus and European Partnerships Manager. So together we're going to talk you through some of the study abroad opportunities that are available to you here in Trinity. Just before I get started and tell you more about some of the exchanges and the exchange opportunities available, I just want to briefly go through why study abroad. I'm sure many of you already have an idea of what's so amazing about studying abroad, but I thought I'd go through it with you just real quick. So first and foremost, you get to experience a new culture. So studying abroad is nothing like going on a holiday. You really get to immerse yourself in the traditions, the local customs, the cuisine. You learn more about the history and you make local friends. So it's just, trust me when I say it's completely different. I did 2 exchanges, so I think I know what I'm talking about. Also, you gain a global education. So while you're abroad, you'll have the opportunity to experience new ways of learning. You'll have access to completely different academic opportunities. You'll really learn to think outside the box. And do keep in mind that any global, experience like that looks amazing when you're applying for graduate schools. I know that might be way down the line, but it's also something to start thinking about now. You really get to hone in on your language skills. That goes without saying. I mean, whether you're looking to brush up on your high school French or you're studying a language here in Trinity, the best way to learn a language, again, speaking from experience, is actually to study abroad. You're surrounded by local people speaking the language. You hear it on the radio, you hear it on TV, and at some point, it kind of gets embarrassing when you can't say a word or two. So you end up picking up a language, even if that wasn't your intention. So studying abroad is obviously fantastic for that. It improves your employment prospects exponentially. So most of the skills that you will gain on exchange are transferable, and employers will be super interested in these skills. So, you always hear these buzzwords in the 21st century workplace, agile, flexible, open-minded, global citizen, critical thinking skills, all of these skills you will gain from studying abroad. So that looks fantastic on your CV. You'll definitely be quizzed about it, and also it is reported that students that go on exchange actually earn higher salaries after graduation than their non-mobile peers. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. You also get to travel and see the world. Whether you're in Europe and you decide to go interrailing around the continent, or you're exchanging in Australia and you decide to go for an exotic holiday in Bali, it's just a flight away. Or, you're in the US and you decide to take a big long road trip. You do have access to more of the world, maybe, than you would if you're just, living in Ireland. It might be too expensive, for you to fly over to Australia on a holiday, but, when you're living there, you'll have access to all the countries around it, and likewise for pretty much anywhere in the world. You enhance your international network. So not only will you make friends, potentially with other Trinity students that are studying abroad, you'll make local friends, but you'll also make a lot of international friends who are also on exchange. So keep that in mind. This is fantastic for whenever you're traveling in your future. You'll always have a couch to sleep on. You'll find new interests, so in Ireland, maybe there's a couple of things that might not necessarily be available to you. You can't necessarily go skiing, but if you're in the Alps or if you're in Canada, you'll be able to try new things, and you might find new hobbies and interests. And obviously personal development, it goes without saying, you'll come back a completely different person, whether you want to or not. It's what students say every single time when they come from exchange. Your friends and family might not even recognize you. You'll be more independent. You'll see the world in a different way. Some of your beliefs and thoughts might even be challenged during your time abroad. So it really is a life-changing experience. And, it's not just a cliche thing to say. You'll know. So I am responsible for international exchange, and I'm going to talk you through what that means here in Trinity. So international exchange just basically means non-European exchanges. So as I mentioned, my colleague Brendan, he'll talk to you about everything Europe related, but I'm going to talk to you everything outside of Europe. So we currently have 56 international partnerships all over the world, and this includes some of the top universities and Ivy League institutions. This is a program that we're growing every year, so more and more opportunities will be available to incoming students. And just another thing to note, some faculties and schools will have their own international exchanges separate to the college-wide program. College-wide means that anyone within the college can apply for any of these, but some faculties like engineering, medicine, law and business, Middle Eastern and European languages and culture students, so their schools might have their own linkages with other international partners. So I'm going to quickly talk you through who our exchange partners are around the globe. Now, just to mention, this is me flying through our partners, but in reality, when you come to Trinity, we'll have information sessions where I talk you through, we have regional information sessions where I tell you about, different customs and, what the education system is like over in X part of the world. So it's much more in depth. But, in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of list them out here. So over in Australia, we have Australian National University, University of Melbourne, Monash University, University of Queensland, University of New South Wales, Sydney in Western Australia. And then in New Zealand, we have University of Auckland. So, I'll be telling you more about this, and you'll find more information on the website, which I'll link to a little bit later. But just so you know, Australia would be one of the more popular kind of exchange destinations. Then we have Canada, McGill, University of British Columbia, University of Toronto, University of Waterloo. Always lots of competition for University of Toronto every year. United States, we have a lot of partners there because there's a lot of interest from our students. So we have Barnard College, which is a women's only university. We have New York University, we have University of Notre Dame, Boston College, Georgetown University, University of California, always super popular, University of Chicago, University of Massachusetts, University of Florida, University of North Carolina, University of Pennsylvania, University of Southern California, and University of Wisconsin. And then more east in Mainland China and Hong Kong. So Mainland China, we're partnered with Tsinghua University, Peking University, University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. Not even going to try and pronounce it because I still haven't mastered it, XJTLU and Beihang University. And then in Hong Kong, we have Chinese University of Hong Kong, City University of Hong Kong, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and the University of Hong Kong. Further down and across, I suppose, we have in Japan, we have Kyoto University, University of Tokyo, and Waseda University. We also have Yonsei University, and we call it SKKU for sure because I can't pronounce that either, but that's in South Korea, and that tends to be, those two universities are very popular with their students, probably something to do with the rise of K-dramas and K-pop. In Singapore, we have National University of Singapore, Singapore Management University, and Nanyang Technological University. And then in Thailand, we have Mahidol University. We also have Lomonosov Moscow State University, where I actually did my exchange. Loved it, it was amazing. And then in India, we have Ashoka University and OP Jindal University. And last but not least, in South Africa, we have Stellenbosch University in Cape Town. So all the information about how to apply, more information on every single partner, it's listed on our Study Abroad website. You have the link there on screen. But as I said, when you come to Trinity and when you're looking to apply, we'll be running a lot of information sessions and giving you all this information. Briefly about the application process, you do need to keep in mind it's very competitive and it's based on merit, kind of similar to the CAO system. So there's a minimum grade requirement of a 2.2, which is, Trinity's terms for 50 to 59%. So that makes you eligible to apply. However, some places, like the States and Australia tend to be more competitive. So you do want to be scoring higher than that in order to secure your preferred placement. So your first year grades do matter if you want to study abroad. I know you're all going to have a lot of fun when you come to college, but it's important to keep your head down and actually focus on studies, because first year grades are the only thing that we're going to be looking at, because you'll be applying in your second year to go abroad in your third, the exception being engineering, which is a year later. You have the option of going for either a semester or a year. And this is something that we get asked all the time, so I just thought I'd throw it in there. Exchanges are actually fee neutral, so you register in Trinity as you would any other year, and you only pay your Trinity tuition. You don't need to pay anything additional to the partner university, which brings us on to the fees and scholarships. So not obviously, I just told you, you won't have to pay any tuition fees, but there will be other, additional costs that you'll encounter. You'll be paying for accommodation in another country. You'll have to keep in mind, there's things like health insurance, travel insurance, books, things like that. So there will be some additional costs, but We have a number of financial supports to help you on your exchange. So we have the Provost Asian and African Travel Bursary, which is a bursary of €1,000 offered to all students that are going on an exchange to those partner universities to defray the cost of flights. And then under the new Global Relations Strategy, we have additional funding. We call them the Global Mobility Bursaries. So there's more funding available through that, and more information is on the website. And then finally, obviously an exchange can sometimes be intimidating, or it might be too costly, or you might just not want to be away from Trinity for that long, or your family, whatever the reason. But a number of these partner universities that I talked about offer opportunities in the form of summer programs, which are somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks in duration typically. And in some cases, they don't even have tuition costs. So, you might pay for flights and living expenses, but you might not need to pay the tuition fees, or there might be a generous partner discount, so it's a lot cheaper and a lot more cost efficient. Now, you don't get any Trinity credit, but they can be a fantastic experience and they look great on your CV. And again, further information can be found on the website. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, emats@gcdu.ie. I'd be more than happy to talk you through any queries or concerns that you may have. And without further ado, I am going to pass you over to my colleague Brendan, who's going to talk to you about all things Europe.
Thanks, Alina. Hello everyone, I'm Brendan Tighe. I am the Erasmus and European Partnerships Manager here in Trinity College Dublin. I'm going to be speaking to you today about Erasmus, which I hope some of you are already a little bit familiar with. Erasmus is the European Union's flagship student mobility programme, and it's widely acknowledged as one of the biggest successes of the European Union. And it's also Trinity's largest student mobility programme. And the reason it is the largest, perhaps, is that it is very flexible, and almost all students will have an opportunity to go abroad via Erasmus. You can go abroad, for instance, to study in a partner university and follow modules and lectures delivered over there, which will count towards your degree here. You could go and do a traineeship or a work placement in an enterprise or company abroad. And sometimes students go off and do a research project as well. And they could be doing research in a partner university's lab that could count towards their degree again here in Dublin. And that could be part of their capstone project, which happens in their final year. Students in the health sciences, they can also go on Erasmus, and generally they tend to go abroad during the summer months on a placement, and they go on a placement in a partner university's associated hospital. And it's flexible in the sense that they can also go for a full year or for one semester, whether semester 1, also known as Michaelmas term, or semester 2, which is known as Hilary term. The minimum duration for an Erasmus to be acceptable is 2 months, and the maximum is up to 12 months. So you could really spend up to a year abroad with Erasmus. Many of you are probably wondering, well, where can I go? And that comes down to the partner universities that we have. We actually have 180 partner universities all across Europe with 21 countries covered. That doesn't quite cover every single country of the European Union, but we are working on developing more and more partnerships every year. Some eagle-eyed viewers will probably notice that the UK is mentioned here, and it's true that the UK is still a member of the Erasmus programme for now, but we'll find out in January whether or not they are going to become some form of associated member or not. That all comes down to how well the Brexit negotiations go, and it's actually something similar in Switzerland. It's mentioned here, but Switzerland isn't technically a member of the Erasmus program, but they have a parallel program that runs almost the exact same way, so we have lumped it in here today. One point of note, and it's a huge asterisk, I guess, that we need to be aware of here, is that each school has its own exchange agreements. So it's not true that every single student can go to any one of the 180 partner universities that we, as an institution, have relationships with. In fact, each school or department has its own specific set of exchange agreements, Erasmus agreements, let's call them, and the reason behind that is that it's in essence one school or department here in Trinity is finding its equivalent in a partner university abroad. So it tends to be, for instance, in the Hispanic department or Italian department, the languages, let's say, that they will have links mainly to the country that they of the language that they are focused on, whereas something like economics or politics could have agreements that cover almost every single country. So it really comes down again to the linkages that your school or department has with universities abroad. But every single school or department has these links, and you will have options to go abroad. And as I said earlier, we're always looking for new partnerships that are going to be of interest to our students. The best thing about Erasmus is that you're given money to go abroad, and this money is funded from the European Union. It ranges from between 250 and 400 euro per month based on the cost of living in your host country. And actually students who do an internship get a top-up of about 100 euro per month. And something that students should be aware of is that if they're registered with TCD Disability, they also get a top-up. And the top-up is designed to overcome some of the barriers that students with disabilities may have when going abroad. So it could cover the extra costs associated with getting to and from your host country, or even to and from your host university on a daily basis. It could cover extra supports or something like a note taker or a piece of technology that you might need. Something of note as well is that students who are in receipt of the SUSI grant are able to hold on to their SUSI grant for the year abroad, and they also get a top-up as well as the Erasmus grant, so they're able to accumulate grants to go abroad. And while going on a year abroad or a semester abroad can be costly, something to bear in mind is that the cost of living in many European cities is much lower than here in Dublin. So if you're going to be paying Dublin rents, you can sometimes actually work out, in an odd situation, saving money by going on Erasmus, because the cost of living is lower and you're given money to go abroad. You'll see here as well that Switzerland, again, as I mentioned, they have their parallel program, and the funding is also available there. More practically, you might be asking yourself, like, well, do I have to meet any conditions to be able to go abroad? And you do, and they vary slightly from school to school, but in general, it's fair to say that you need to have maintained a minimum grade of a 2-2, which is more than achievable for the majority of students. Certain schools will push you to get a 2-1 to allow you to go abroad, and the reason that they're pushing for that is that they feel that if you don't have that minimum level, you might struggle at the partner university. And it's something that we talked about kind of earlier on in this presentation, that not all universities teach the same way, not all universities grade the same way. So it can be harder to study at partner universities, but well worth the challenge. And that's why they might, in certain cases, push you to have a higher average grade before you go. The schools are the ones who decide where you get to go, but it's based on an application process, which is a little bit like the CAO, except they add in a piece of motivation. So you might rank your preferred destinations. They'll take a look at your grades from the years before, and then they'll look at your reasons for wanting to go where you want to go, and they'll try and figure out a way to keep as many people happy as possible. With regards to finances, going back again, remember that you do get the grant, but you also do have to pay your tuition fees here in Trinity, but you never ever have to pay tuition fees at the host university. Sometimes there are really small charges, for instance, for insurance or for access to the sports facilities, but they're well worth paying because the level of cover in the insurance is great, and that's something that's becoming increasingly important. I can't stress that enough. And taking part in student societies and sports is the best way to integrate in any university here in Trinity or abroad, so I definitely do recommend that you take up the offer. Some of you might be thinking, well, I won't go on Erasmus because I don't speak French, or I don't speak German, or I don't speak Italian. And I'm here to tell you that if English is your only language, you can definitely still go on Erasmus. Many host universities actually teach through English. Plenty of universities in the Nordic countries, Netherlands, Malta, teach entirely through English. And then other universities across Europe, whether it's for business degrees, computer science degrees, engineering, the sciences, they'll teach through English. So definitely don't think of language as a barrier. Now, outside of the university walls, you will have to pick up some of the native language, but I really think it's actually going to stand to you long term if you push yourself to pick up another language during your studies. As you know, Dublin, we have plenty of headquarters here for tech companies, pharmaceutical companies, banking, finance, and so on, but they're the European headquarters, so plenty of your future colleagues, if you're ever working in Dublin, will have these languages, and they're a real benefit because you're doing business with the European countries. Certain universities where they do teach through the native language have minimum language requirements. That's something that you'll be aware of when you're applying. But the best thing with regards to languages is that you're also offered online linguistic support. Now, it's mandatory in the sense that everybody has to do a placement test at the start and the end, just so we can figure out how much your language skills developed. But it's a really great tool, and while online learning is something that you're getting very familiar with very quickly, it's something that you should be aware of when you're thinking about maybe going to study in a French university that teaches entirely in English, but you want to be able to get by day to day. The OLS will be really useful there. There's lots more information on our website. If you just Google TCD Study Abroad, you should find all the information you need. I'm sorry it was so brief today, but you'll have lots more information when you're here in Trinity, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. If you just pop an email to erasmus@tcd.ie, we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and we'd be happy to help you to go abroad during your studies. Thanks very much for your attention today. Have a good time.